Hello and welcome to Transform Tuesday. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product Management here at Alpha Software, and I am pleased to be joined by Sarah Mitchell, our Director of Customer Success. Let me unpause my screen here. All right, today on Transform Tuesday, we are going to be talking about error checking and validation. This is a very big topic, and it's probably one of the, besides having to do double entry. It's probably one of the biggest features that people like when they digitize paper forms and turn them into electronic forms that they can fill out on a phone or a tablet. And that's because when you check for errors, as you're typing them in, it means that you don't have to hunt them down later on. We had talked to a couple of companies recently, both of them in the quality manufacturing space, and they said that they spend an inordinate amount of time with pieces of paper tracking down readings that were taken off machines or numbers that were copied off of boxes or things like that, in which the number was either transposed wrong and if they had just looked at it, they would have seen it. They would have said, "Oh, I'm missing a digit" or something like that. But you can't check that stuff on paper forms like you can with electronic forms. So today we're going to be going over error checking and validation. And the nice thing about it is there's almost no code. There's one part that kind of looks like code, but I think you'll find it pretty easy to follow. So let's get started. So what are some examples of error checking and validation? Well, here are the ones right here. You can check to see if a value is over or below a certain limit. In other words, does this number even make sense? Another one is required value. Did you leave something out that you should have filled in? You could do a validation based on a formula. Probably a more sophisticated example of that would be doing, say, a checksum on a UPC code to make sure that it was either typed in or scanned in properly. You can compare fields to other fields to see if they add up together or above a certain amount or below a certain amount or something like that. You could do validation against other fields. In other words, some combinations may not make sense or be possible. I'll show you that as well. And you could do date and time restrictions. For example, if you were setting up a follow-up appointment in your transform form, you don't want to make that appointment in the past, so it will catch you for making that type of error as well. So those are the examples that I'm going to show today, but there are many other ways in which you could track down errors in Alpha Transform. Some of the more interesting ones could involve doing Ajax callbacks against databases, for example, or doing onboard lookups of databases to make sure that the values that you entered are appropriate for whatever it is that you're measuring or taking notes on. All right, so let us get started. I think the next thing we're going to go over is our live demo. But actually, this is a pre-recorded demo. This first part is a couple of minutes. I'm just going to play it right now. And the only reason I'm doing it pre-recorded is because I didn't want to have to worry about my phone broadcasting. As we've seen in prior sessions, sometimes that could be sketchy. So here we are. We're going to take a look here at this form. And the first one is pulse rate. And I put down 0 as a pulse rate. And it said, a reasonable number is between 40 and 90. So if I enter in 50, for example, you'll see that my error message, my warning, has gone away. Likewise, I've got a required field. I'm going to leave that blank. So that's sort of an error there. And let's do a validation based on a formula. Let's say the number of wheels on a truck or on a lorry. Well, that should be an even number, not an odd number. So if I put in 7, I know I've done something wrong. In this case, I'm using two fields, length and width, and I'm multiplying them together to get the area. And in this case, the area would be 500, but I've decided I'm going to set a limit of 250. So if I put in a different number, that should work. Here we've got age. So imagine a person is 15 years of age and you want to know their beverage choice. If they select wine, it's going to say, I'm sorry, wine is restricted to ages 21 and above. And for start date, if I choose a date that is before today, let's say May 2nd or something like that, and I enter that as my date, it's going to tell me I need to choose a start date after today. So let's take a look at all those errors and mistakes that I just made. You'll see they're all highlighted there in red. And if I tap the hamburger menu and I choose list problems, you'll see it lists out all of the things that I've done wrong. And I can tap on one of them and actually go directly back into right to that field and make a correction, which is helpful if you've got hundreds or thousands of things on there. So let's fill in the signature and let's just work through here and start fixing the problems. Number of wheels, let's make this a semi-truck, an 18-wheeler. And we're going to scroll down and we're going to reduce that width from 100 to say 2. There we go. And date validation, let's choose a date that is after today. So let's just move ahead a couple days and tap OK on that. And there again, all of my errors have disappeared. So if I return now to that hamburger menu, you'll see that list problems has been dimmed out. I can tap on it all I want, but there are no problems. So everything passes and I can actually go down and now submit this form if I want to. So that's an example of it in action. What I'd like to do now is show you how I set that up. So let me close that for a second. And I'm going to pop back over to my main screen. And let me just turn on Do Not Disturb so I am not disturbed. I'll just Do Not Disturb for now. There we go. All right, so let's take a look. I'm going to open up my browser. I'm going to go over to Transform Central here at transform.alphasoftware.com. And move my GoToWebinar thing out of the way. Here we go. And I'm going to go into the designer. Let's take a look at that form that I built. Give it a moment to load my list of forms. I have a gazillion forms, so this does take a second the first time you click on that tab. All right, there we go. Let's scroll all the way down to TT for Transform Tuesday Validation. I'm going to go ahead and click on that one. And now what I'm going to do is just go ahead and I'm going to edit the form commands. I could do that by double clicking, but I'm just going to click up here, Edit Form Commands. And let's see how this form was put together. So let's first take a look at the fields. I've got a field here called pulse rate. And I've got another field here called number of wheels. And I've got a field called signature, whoops, which is up here. And I've got a field called length and one called width, beverage choice, age, and date validation. So those are my fields. And of all the commands here, they only take up maybe 5 or 6 of the spots. The rest of them are what we use to put together the error checking. So error checking involves 2 parts when you're doing an error check. And I'm going to go ahead and replace one of these. Let's say, yeah, let's do this one. I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. Should give me an error here because I did get rid of the end, and I'm going to remove that. Okay, so right now there's now no longer error checking on my pulse rate field. Now imagine I want to add in the error checking. What I do first is I insert a command called an error indication. The error indication basically tells the user what's wrong, and it's a thing that will be displayed if the condition is not met. So I'm going to tap plus, and I'm going to scroll down here to set error indication. There it is. And now I have 2 things here. I've got error text and optional message. So you're saying, well, what's the difference between the 2? Well, the error text is the one that's going to appear when you tap on that hamburger menu. The optional message is the one that's going to appear down here. And so I'm going to just remove this optional message, and I'm going to say the pulse rate should be between, let's say, 20 and 200. And then for the error text, we can just do that shorter. We could say something like pulse rate out of bounds. Okay, so 2 different messages. This one appears when you tap on the hamburger menu and you say list problems. This is the one that appears directly here on the form. All right, now as I have it set up right now, this error would always be the case. In other words, if I were to run this form, I would see that error message and there'd be no way to clear it. So we only want that error to appear and activate conditionally. So to do that, we're going to use an if statement. So I'm going to hit plus, and I'm going to go down to if, and I'm going to say enclose. And now here is my if. So my field is up here, and my error is now wrapped in an if. So if the condition in my if is true, it's going to turn on that error. So here we're going to go ahead and enter in what my test is going to be. And we've given some examples down here. It's basically very similar to JavaScript. So this is the part that I was saying that looks a little bit like coding. It's not too bad though. So to reference a field, in this case, it's the pulse field. I'm going to say pulse is less than 20. And then I'm going to do an OR. And this is how you do an OR. You do two type symbols. That's the one above the slash on your keyboard, on most keyboards anyway. And I'm going to hit pulse greater than 200. So if we read this out, if the pulse that you enter is less than 20, or the pulse is greater than 200, then what we're going to do is we're going to activate that error message. And that's all it was to it, to add in that error. Let's take a look at the other ones that we did, which are already pre-baked. I'll show you how those work. The one for the required field is the easiest of all. This is called the signature field. I don't even have to put in an error message for this one or an if statement. All I have to do here is say that it's a required field. By default, fields aren't required, so this radio button would be set to no. But here I'm going to go ahead and tap on yes, and there we go. Moving on down, let's take a look at the number of wheels on the truck. This one is kind of a funner one. If the number of wheels, if the modulus of modulo of number of wheels, comma 2 is greater than 0, what this does is this function here basically gives you a remainder. So I've taken the number of wheels, I've divided it by the number 2, and if it's an even number, then it's going to divide evenly. There won't be a remainder. But if it's an odd number, then there will be a remainder. So this is my test for even and odd, and I did it using the mod function, which is a common sort of function found in many languages. Now, how did I know to use that or even test that out? Well, let me show you a little trick. I'm going to go back here into here. Well, I may as well save my changes while I'm here. And I'm going to go and click on Edit Custom Code. If this isn't available to you, you probably have to just tap on Advanced Features and say Enable Custom Code for this type. You're going to tap Yes, and you're going to say Edit Custom Code. And over here, you will find a lovely selection of all of the different functions that are available, including the mod function. What I tend to do, though, is I tend to go to the documentation to look that up. Let me just open up the documentation window. Pop over here and go to Alpha Transform Documentation. And after I happen to know about this function, so I'm going to just do a search. Search. And here we go. And this is the page that describes all of the functions right here. So I can actually just do a Control F at this point and take a look for mod. And there it is. It explains how that works, what the inputs are, and so on. All right. So that's all set. Let's pop back to Alpha Transform. So now if I had that mod there, let's say I wasn't used to this particular function and I wanted to see how it works. I could go over here into Transform and I could use the tester. The tester can be used for testing out single lines of TPL, which is basically what the if statement is. So here, if I typed in, for example, mod 3, 2, and I click execute, it's going to tell me that I have a remainder of 1. 3 divided by 2 is 1 with 1 left over. So let's change that to an even number, let's say 18, and I should have a mod of 0, which I do. So that's how I was able to test this out ahead of time. You might end up building a really, really long expression in here. The other thing you can do, which we won't get into too much today, is you can actually build a function that you can then use in your if statement. And that can be very, very sophisticated if you like. All right, let's jump back over to the form. So I'm going to cancel out of here. Whoops. And let's take a look at a few of the other validation examples. So we've already done the number of wheels. That was sort of a sophisticated one. Let's take a look at this one. This one says if the length times the width is greater than 250, that's when this condition will be true. So it just basically multiplies these two together. And if it does become true, then of course my error activator is set up and it says the area is too large. The area must be less than 250. Now let's take a look at validating against another field. In this case, we did this with a beverage choice. Again, I have my error that I built first saying, oops. Oh, it's looking at the wrong place. Here we go. Here we see the age restriction on beverage that's my message that I have here. One is restricted to ages 21 and above, age restriction on beverage. So over here on my if statement, I said, if the beverage is equal to wine, and you see this double ampersand, that's how you do the and here. Age is less than 21, then we'll display that error. And then finally, the last one that I did was the date validation. And here I said, if my start date, again, I set up my error, but my if statement is if start date is less than or equal to now, which is a function that returns the current date. I think it returns the current date and time as well, which is actually kind of important to know because if you're comparing a date against a time, the date is going to seem smaller. It's always going to assume that it's happening at 1 second past midnight or something like that. So that's something to keep in mind. But that's all you have to do is to make sure that the date is in the future. Is you just say start date is less than or equal to now. Actually, I should have said start date is greater than or equal to now. I think I did that wrong. There we go. Let's see if someone caught me. Let me take a look here on the questions. Someone said, can you use brackets or parentheses to group things in the test? Yes, you absolutely can. You can do that. It's all part of the TPL syntax. And again, I would suggest testing that over in the tester before you put it in here in the if statement, just because it'll save you a little bit of time to get it right. All right, so that's what we are covering today when it comes to validation and error checking. Are there any other questions? No, it doesn't look like it. All right, excellent. Hey, everyone, thank you very much for showing up today. Sarah, thanks for being here. We look forward to seeing you at our next Transform Tuesday. Until then, take care and stay well. Bye-bye.